time to wake up. It's Saturday morning. Find some milk and cereal. Grab a bowl and spoon. No, a bigger spoon. Head to the living room and take a seat on the floor while Joseph and Chris present to you Saturday Morning Cartoon!
Hello, everybody, and welcome to Saturday Morning Cartoon Boom. This is a show where we wake up with the Saturday morning sun, popped on the floor with a big old sugary cereal, and watch our favorite cartoons, both old and new. I'm Joseph.
And I'm Chris.
And this morning, we watched Our Friend Martin. More specifically, it should be called My Friend Martin, because I don't know if he's friends with you. You're just kind of all of our friend by default.
Yeah.
But he and I go way back.
Oh, I see.
We're speaking, of course, of Martin Lawrence, star of TV show Martin, and other things that aren't coming to mind right now.
Any other Martins you can think of?
Martin Short.
Yes. The shorter of the Martins, yeah.
Martin from The Simpsons.
Oh, yeah. He's the main character of this one. So.
Yeah, it's just all Martins all the time.
All Martins.
All you can handle. More Martin than you can handle.
Welcome to Martin Cast.
Real Martin's talking about Martin things. Oh, man. I feel like we've already insulted the actual movie that we watched.
We've already jumped the Martin.
That was funnier than it should have been, but
yeah, no, it's not that funny, but it made us laugh, and I feel bad that we did laugh.
No, I hope someone takes that like they did some other things that I won't mention because then they'll come back to life.
Yeah,
I hope someone takes this and makes it viral.
Yes, the Martin. Yeah,
jump the Martin.
Jump the Martin.
Yeah. Oh, I love it.
That sounds really bad out of context. I'm sorry for anyone named Martin that gets jumped as a result of our actions.
Jump the Martin. Oh, poor Martins.
If we don't want to be the next Logan Paul, like it's just ruining everyone's day.
If we have any Martin listeners, though, please reach out because I'd like to know what it's like to live as a Martin.
Yeah, tell us about your Martin experience.
Your Martinisms. Yeah,
we want to know about the Martins. That Martins are real. That they're here among us. And just
I don't think I've ever met a Martin in real life, honestly.
I've only known people's last names as Martin, but I've never met a true Martin.
Yeah, exactly. I know last name Martins, but never. Man. Yeah. Maybe they don't exist. Maybe they're all fictional characters.
It could be.
So who suggested this movie to us?
This was suggested by Ira Sutton, who we've done a couple suggestions from him before, but he asked us to do something for Black History Month and mentioned this one specifically. And so we were like, okay. So thanks, Ira.
Yeah, thank you, Ira. I don't think we've ever done anything specifically for Black History Month, so it was due time. And I think this was a great way to do it, great way to start it.
Yeah, I would agree. And, we toyed with the idea at some point of, or like at one point of doing like a special episodes every week for this month. But then we were just like, that might be a little too pandering from us who like neither of us are black. So we're just like, you know what? Yeah, let's do the one and done. Let's do a little special to show you how we love yous. We love all of our darker friends and brothers. Then I'm super white right now.
You're being very white.
I know. Like if I stood outside in pitch black, you'd still be able to see me.
How about we just say we love everybody. We are all inclusive.
We love everyone. And
so this is just our tribute to this month.
Yeah, we love everyone except for orange people.
Are we talking like Oompa Loompas?
Yeah, that's what we're talking about. Oompa Loompas.
Yeah, just to keep it off the political spectrum.
It's definitely Oompa Loompas is what we're talking about.
Yes, Oompa Loompas.
They're just, I don't trust them walking around singing songs about candy. No. How many kids do you think are buried in there?
Do you think that that's what they feast on?
I think that the kids become part of the candy.
What if the kids become the Oompa Loompas? Oompa Loompas. Like, what if that's what they transform into if they're bad?
Well, what if it's like a Wendigo thing and it's like the consumption of child flesh turns you into an Oompa Loompa?
So wait, they're forcing the children to consume other children?
Yeah, well, it's like some of the children are for the like, so it originally started where they used there was a massacre of children that they used to make the candies. And now, I mean, they got so much candy in that place that like when new children come in and get lost from the herd, they like force feed them other children to become Oompa Loompas once their numbers are down.
After singing them a somber little tune.
Yeah, because Oompa Loompas can't procreate, so like they gotta make them how they can.
Were there any female Oompa Loompas? I
don't think so. I think they're all guys.
Are they guys or are they just asexual?
I think they're all Oompa Loompas.
Okay, yeah. Let's not segregate. They're just all Oompa Loompas.
Yeah.
So getting back on track, if there ever was a track,
nope.
We the actual Martin in the movie we watched today was Dr. Martin Luther King
Jr.
And yeah, you're right, Martin Luther King Jr. So sorry for our going way off the rails here, leading into this. And this movie came out in 1999. It was written by Don Comer and Chris Simmons. Also, Sib Ventress and Deborah Pratt. Produced by Deke Entertainment. This is on CBS and the Fox Video, or this is actually produced by CBS and the Fox Video. And for a short synopsis, two friends travel through time, meeting Dr. King at several points during his life.
That does happen. Yeah.
That's a fact.
And then a couple more friends joined too. Don't forget about them.
Tell us first, like, who are some of the actors who played in this movie?
Okay, there's a lot. And because there's so many, I'm not going to go into their backgrounds so much. I'm just going to say who voiced who.
I think a lot of these will be very recognizable names. So you don't necessarily
most of these will not need much explanation. That said, the first four probably will, but you'll just have to do that research on your own. So the voice of Miles was Robert Richard. I think it's Richard and not Richard because there's an apostrophe in there. So we'll go with that. The voice of Randy was Lucas Black. The voice of Kyle was Zachary Leigh. The voice of Maria, Jessica Garcia. The voice of Mr. Harris was Edward Asner. The voice of Miles' mom was Angela Bassett. The voice of the train conductor was Danny Glover. The voice of Mrs. Peck was Whoopi Goldberg. The voice of Turner was Samuel L. Jackson. The voice of Martin's father was James Earl Jones. The voice of Mrs. Dale was Ashley Judd. The voice of Mrs. Clark was Susan Sarandon. The voice of Kyle's dad was John Travolta. The voice of Coretta Scott King was Oprah Winfrey. The voice of Bull Connor and the Chihuahua, of course, was Frank Welker. The voice of Christine King was Yolanda King, which is Martin Luther King Jr.'s real daughter. And then the voice of Martin Luther King at age 12 was Theodore Borders. The voice of Martin at age 15 was Jaleel White. The voice of Martin at age 26 was LeVar Burton. And finally, the voice of Martin at age 34 was Dexter Scott King, Martin Luther King Jr.'s actual son.
What a great cast.
Oh my gosh. Yeah, such a big list, so many big names. And especially so many from the black community, and I mean, like the big hitter recognizable ones. Like I love the fact, I don't know what it is. I love the fact that James Earl Jones voiced Martin Luther King's Jr.'s father. I'm just like, voice, it's the perfect voice.
It's so commanding. I love his voice.
I love it so much. Voice. Yeah. And I'm a huge fan of Angela Bassett. I love that actress so much. She's one of my favorites.
And I liked hearing, there's something for me, and maybe it's just a personal thing, I don't know, but there's something really comforting about Whoopi Goldberg's voice for me. Like, just as a kid, I had heard it so much, I guess, growing up, that now when I hear it, it just like gives me kind of a warm feeling inside.
Yeah, I know what you mean. It's kind of, because her voice is so distinct, it's kind of like an old friend, you know? You get like that real nostalgic feel, and it's a very comforting voice she's got.
Exactly, yeah. And so I think the casting was just spot on for everybody. Like everybody played, like even Samuel L. Jackson, like with his like over the top roles playing as Turner, like it totally worked right here. Like I can't imagine anybody else being that disgruntled.
Yeah, exactly. Because that character kind of comes in all angry about stuff, and he starts, he kind of tries to start something, and I'm like, yep, they nailed it.
Yeah, exactly. And not even stuff like angry about white people.
Yeah, and I love also in that same vein the train conductor, who's just kind of like, he's old and just kind of over it, being Danny Glover. I'm like, that's just hilarious. That's perfect.
Yeah.
He's just like,
he's too old for crazy. This stuff. Yeah.
He's like muttering under his breath.
And this is also just further proof that Frank Welker is in absolutely everything.
It's true. Even this.
Yeah,
like, who would have thought? especially voicing another animal. He's voicing a chihuahua.
Yeah, I mean, if you're going to have any kind of animal, why not make it him?
Yep, exactly.
So for a few tasty marshmallows out of our big bowl of MLK cereal, Maria stating that she skipped 2 grades in school is a reference to how Martin Luther King Jr. did the same thing when he was in elementary school. So that's something, that's just kind of a small nod to that. I think they mention it in the movie, like his skipping a grade or 2. But yeah, they do, because he's talking about how he's going to go to college like at a young age. Yeah.
You know, I'm kind of surprised that like, and like, I'm not, don't take this the wrong way. I'm just, because of the times back then, I'm almost kind of surprised that they would let like a young black man skip a couple grades or something, you know? Like, I'm surprised that they recognized his intelligence and allowed him to do something like that when, you know, they were living in a society that like tends to do the exact opposite.
Yeah, I mean, times were so
weird back then.
It's like, and since we didn't live in that period ourselves, it's hard for us to, without, you know, obviously researching and everything, to know where the line was for things like that. So I know what you mean. And I know you don't mean any offense by it either, but as much as they were like cutting black people off from doing certain things, it's strange what they, I guess, did let pass and what they didn't. Like even smaller things, like you can skip ahead a couple grades, but you can't drink from the same water fountain. And it's like, wow, like why is that a line? You know, that doesn't make sense.
Yeah, something like that is just super weird to me. But like you said, it's because, I mean, we didn't live in those times. It's going to be impossible for us to completely understand. So like everything, and there are so many points in this film that I'm just like, I can't even fathom the real way that things had to have felt back then, because it's just something that doesn't exist in that capacity anymore. I mean, we still see, you know, discrimination in the forms of other things.
Sure.
You know, like especially like the transgender community is like probably one of the more discriminated communities at the moment, or at least in recent years. So, I mean, we see that, but it's nowhere near the extent of how things were back then. It's not even close.
Right. There are pockets of it now, but that's fortunately, that's in the minority versus where I would say the majority of us, and not even like me giving a benefit of the doubt, I would almost 100% sure that the majority of us, I'm hoping, and all of our listeners, I hope, are all for racial equality or just equality in general, and segregation is not even something on their minds.
Yeah, I think it's like the generations that came after the, you know, Martin Luther King Jr. in general, the ones that didn't hear his message when they were already adults, but the ones that grew up with his message having already existed. I think that's like there's a big change in the culture there. So I think like you know, millennials and maybe the Gen Xers and, you know, any generations after us, I think it's really going to be like, it's just going to keep dwindling down.
Yeah, but then there's also those kids that are raised in families that are just starkly against that whole message, and so that's where it continues on that just path of inequality and, you know, hatred in ways. So I mean, I don't want to. That's a huge rabbit hole to go down. So we'll just start talking about the movie in a second. But and that was just Marshmallow 1. Marshmallow 2. Over 15 shots of actual footage from back in the 1950s and 60s were used for the flashbacks. And yeah, that's something we do see. And I like how they implemented that in there. I feel like, especially for the time, for the 90s, they did it pretty well too. Like it felt pretty fluid the way that they threw it in.
Yeah, and I like seeing the actual footage. I thought that was cool. And there was another scene too, Martin giving a speech at in Washington, D.C., but then like they used his actual audio, and it wasn't, you know, it wasn't his son voice acting at that point. It was his actual voice. And I thought that was a cool touch. I like that.
Yeah, that's true. And I did notice that. And because you can kind of hear it, and it kind of makes sense the way that they're showing it too. Like since he's speaking over the microphone into the large speakers, it's going to sound a little muffled anyway. So it works well, even though it's starkly different from the voice he uses throughout most of the movie.
Yeah, I just wish that they had better audio quality back then, just so like you could hear it a little better, you know, because I mean there's certain parts that are just, because it's so I mean, the audio from back then isn't what it is now, and it degrades and things like that. So it's like some parts were a little hard for me to understand, but for the most part, I mean, you can hear it pretty well.
Yeah, and I mean the core message, whatever, however much you hear of it, is the same. So
right, yeah,
I think it's nothing that's going to lose its effect because a part or two is left out.
Sure.
The last thing I have really for this is, and kind of inconsequential, but it was the last thing I saw, was this was John Travolta's voice acting debut. So this is the first
really?
time that he did any voice acting. Yeah.
This was the one, huh? That's weird.
Yeah. Of all
is this
things.
his one and only, or?
You know what? I'm not sure of that. A character that I did like in here, and I know you mentioned her, was Susan Sarandon. Like I liked the way, I liked her character in general, and just her voice too is just such a calming voice. I don't know what it is. So do you have any memories of it? Like, had you ever heard of this before?
Without looking it up, when we first heard about it, I thought this was something that I probably saw as a kid, you know, in grade school, in the auditorium or something, where they have an assembly and they pull you in, have you sit down on the floor, and they wheel in the big TV and you just watch it, and that's like, you know, your assembly for the day. So I assumed it was going to be that, but this was made in the time that I was going into high school, and you didn't have those kind of things anymore.
We were both freshmen, but yeah, I see what you mean though. Like this was, it seemed like the perfect audience for this would be
younger kids,
elementary, maybe not elementary, but like grade school, elementary, middle school kids, to kind of just paint this picture in a digestible way.
And that said, like, I think that's actually the experience my girlfriend had though, because she definitely knew this, and she really likes it. So,
well, she is younger than we are, right?
Yeah, quite a bit.
Yeah, exactly. So it's probably right in her field when she was in those grades.
Right. Yeah.
So let's just start talking about the movie. I mean, we had some lead into it, but overall, we start with our character Miles, who is a young black man, and he is, what grade was he in? Sixth grade, I think. Yeah, sixth grade. Yeah. And he, he's going to school, and he's just one of those, like, not worried about his grades or whatever. He just wants to play baseball. And he, unfortunately, like, he is of the mindset where, like, for a colored person to basically make it to college and everything, like, he thinks that they have to rely on getting like a scholarship from sports or something. Like, he thinks that's the only chance he's got. So he's almost like holding himself back because of his preconceived notions of what it takes to succeed.
Yeah. And like, I can kind of understand that in a way that it's just like, if you feel like there's no room for success in one aspect, why even try? Instead, just pour all your effort into the one where you know you would have a chance. And I'm not saying that that's true, because obviously it's not, because that's part of the moral of this movie. But that's definitely his thought process, is like, well, why would I try to get good grades? Because that's not what's going to help me. So like, that doesn't make sense. I
mean, it's also like putting like a self-imposed ceiling there. And if you see that that's as high as you can go, why try to rise above it, is kind of his thought process. His mom's telling him like he needs to work on his school, he needs to work on his grades. Like, she owns her own business and she's going to that. He's saying that she's like a slave to her business, but she's like, no, you're not. Nobody's a slave to their dream.
Yeah. And so he whipped out slave as soon as possible. It's like 5 minutes into the movie, like not even that. I was like,
there's a lot of like red alert words here. Or ideas, I guess, more than anything. Like there are times where you will, as a person who's, well, I'm half minority, like I'm Hispanic, but like there are times where you just feel uncomfortable, not because you think these things, but because you're seeing that passed on to someone else, and you can only imagine how uncomfortable it makes them feel. And especially like the principal in those flashbacks or the altered timeline, I was like, oh my, like he is the worst person in this movie, probably. It is
exactly. So bad. And I did note there was so many times in this movie that I felt super uncomfortable,
right?
Which is, and it's weird to think about, because I mean, me, like being super white. I mean, I'm not any kind of minority other than that. I'm like not even probably quarter Hebrew. Like I've got like a drop of Hebrew in me. So it's just something I can't relate to, like the kind of discrimination and stuff like that, but still makes me feel super uncomfortable just being an empathic person, because I'm just like, oh God, like no, like don't say that to this person. And just like I cringed so many times watching this.
Yeah, because even if you can't directly relate, you can still empathize if you're at all a caring human being. And there are a lot of moments like that's one thing I will say as far as any kind of disclaimer to this is this: it's not all like a happy-go-lucky little kids movie. Like it is, but at the same time, there's mature ideas in here that will kind of push the envelope as far as like what is your comfort level. I'll say that.
Yeah, there's a few things in there to shock you, for sure.
Yeah.
Because the reality of things were shocking. And
exactly.
It's shocking for people in our age now, and people in generations that'll come after us that won't experience, the level of things that we have now, to see how set back we were during those times. It's gonna be a shock.
Yeah. It's almost like pre-age of enlightenment in a way.
Yeah.
And yeah, it's going back and seeing those things. That's where it's like, oh, like you said, cringeworthy at times.
Yeah.
So the bully for this, I want to touch on this a little bit just because this was one of the weird parts of this movie for me was, so the bully, Miles's bully, like everybody's bully, he's this like fat white kid and his name is Kyle, but he is constantly wearing like a shirt that's too short. And I thought it was just maybe like a one-time thing, but it's like throughout the whole movie, like he is wearing like midriff shirts and like not like to be cool or anything, but it's just like the shirt's too small for him or something. I don't know if the idea was supposed to show that he's like from a poor family and that's all he can afford, but it's like, come on, you can afford extra cloth to put over your stomach.
Oh yeah, and a couple of times it's because the shirt gets ripped because he's constantly getting into trouble.
Yeah, but
twice it was ripped. Once it was just too short. Judging from his dad, it's obvious that he is, if not physically, he's very verbally abused by his father.
Oh yeah.
And the thing I was thinking of is like the shirts that are too small, because he when the one shirt rips, he freaks out because he said his dad's going to kill him for ripping another shirt. And then he shows up wearing a shirt that's too small. I think that it's showing that there's like, he's being neglected to a point. Like his dad is just like, yeah, you rip a shirt, I'm not getting you another one. So you're stuck that way. So you're just going to have to make do with what you find, and that's why like in that classroom scene, after he shows up with the small shirt, he steals another student's coat to put over it.
Yeah, that makes sense actually. Like he just never gets his shirts, like he never gets a new shirts because of the way his dad is. Okay, that makes sense. But still, it's a weird thing seeing him basically shirtless throughout the movie. At one point, definitely shirtless. It's like, okay, I mean, I guess I get it, but it's still a weird thing for me.
I thought it was weird too in that scene where he does steal the coat from the other kid. The teacher does nothing. It's just, she just watches and she's like, okay,
lets it go.
Yeah.
And you've also got, Miles's best friend Randy, who has like a Dixie accent, I guess. He's very like,
I don't understand Randy whatsoever. Like, I don't know where they were going with that because he's a skater kid, but talks with a Southern accent,
Oh, so thick. Yeah.
I can tell y'all, I ain't never seen no skateboarder talking like this,
He was a weird kind of juxtaposition of ideas of things that I'd never really thought of going together like that.
No, it doesn't go together like that. Like,
yeah, from the beginning when you see him, it's just kind of a perplexing situation.
He's like an amalgam of like white stereotypes. They tried to take the redneck and they tried to take the the stoner skater dude and fuse him into one person, and it did not work.
I guess that's true, but he is Miles' best friend, and he's the white best friend to show the form of equality that we have now.
Yeah,
And it's not until they go to this museum, Dr. Martin Luther King's previous house, but it's set up as a museum kind of showing parts of his life. And you've got Whoopi Goldberg's character, Mrs. Peck, who is the curator. Martin's old room is closed off. Miles is curious to go in there because he saw that Dr. King played baseball and things like that, and he wanted to just go in and experience it himself. He goes in, and then he gets caught. Well, he and Randy both get caught by Mrs. Peck. You kind of sense that something's going on like right away when she says like, be careful, boys, or something like that, or have a nice trip. That's what she says.
Yeah, she said have a nice trip. That was, I was like,
and it's like, that's ominous. Okay.
Is she giving them drugs or thinks they're going to do some acid or something, or like what?
Yeah, like what's going on there? And then he picks up at this point, he just picks up the baseball and the mitt, and it transports them back to the past where it's the middle of like kind of a baseball, like a little like makeshift baseball field where Martin Luther King is playing baseball with his friends. And at this point, he's 15 years old. So they're just kind of trying to figure out like how they went back in time or what's going on. And they immediately like start hitting it off with them and become friends. But we see also kind of at a certain point in this game, the racism of the time start to kick in.
The boys that Martin's playing baseball with, it's these two white boys, and their mother shows up and just starts going off on her boys for playing with Martin, and and based on the color of his skin, and just and then this is something I'd like to ask you too, is like, what was the cringiest part of this movie for you? Because I think mine was this scene. Miles and Randy approach also, and they're all talking. So she sees that she sees Randy, another white boy here with two other black boys, and she was just like something to the effect of, if you know what's good for you, you wouldn't be there. And like the pit of my stomach was just like dropping. I was like, oh God, like
like that part was so bad. Like I have it kind of highlighted on my page because I'm like, do I even want to mention that on the show because it's that uncomfortable, or it's like, it's even uncomfortable to repeat it. It's like, it is that harsh of a statement. And yeah, like it comes from this seemingly like innocent, just blonde white mom, but then she just comes in filled with so much like hate.
Yeah, she was totally
based on, yeah. Well, yeah. But, and then Martin is like, basically just says the only cure for fear and hate is love. And so we see at an early age, like he had this mindset of, I'm going to react to this not with arguing or not with violence, but I want to react to this with love. Like that's how we can fix this.
I got to give some kudos to to his father, Reverend King, for obviously instilling those kind of values in his son at such an early age in a world that there's way more people that hate him than care about him. So I just feel like the fact that Martin Luther King Jr. existed the way he did is almost a miracle, honestly.
Yeah, that's kind of like overcoming all odds. And really, it is thanks to his supportive family and most likely his father, for the most part, that he was able to end up that way. It's that pushing past your obstacles and overcoming them versus becoming a victim to them.
Yeah, exactly.
The boys are taken to Martin's house to have dinner with Martin's family, and we see that his father is going to go to, well, he and Martin both are going to go to some shut-in rounds, which is where they go basically to keep company with the sick and the elderly, to visit them because, they're shut-ins, like literally. And so they don't get much company. And this is them kind of helping their fellow man. And a quote that I really liked that his father said was, "A man has no greater purpose in life than to serve his fellow man." And I thought that was just a really beautiful sentiment and definitely something that I think, myself included, we could all do a little more of on a daily basis.
Oh, absolutely. I'd also like to see those words like tattooed on the arm of every politician and police officer. That'd be cool.
You would never see that unless it was irony.
Yeah, exactly. The only reason they would do it is to be ironic at this point.
Yeah. Then they go to Martin's room, and this is where they go on their like second trip through time to they pick up this toy bus in Martin's room, and that transports them to the citywide bus boycott, based on Rosa Parks and her not giving up her seat to the white woman, because at the time that was the law, believe it or not, if you were a black person, that you had to get up at a white person's request if they wanted your seat. And, she was tired, what have you. So she wouldn't get up. And that's what started this protest where the black people of the community would not ride on the buses anymore because of this. They were doing a nonviolent boycott or nonviolent protest of basically just the city buses in general.
Right. Just like, I mean, obviously we know it was a law. It's just the idea of a law like that is just insane to me.
Yeah. This was 1956.
Yeah. It's just crazy.
To think that's not even 100 years ago. Like that's less than.
It's honestly not that long ago. It's just a few generations ago.
Yeah, that is insane to me to put those kind of thoughts to it. Like, wow,
both my parents were alive during this time.
Yeah,
I mean, they were
here.
just little kids, but they were alive. And so just the idea of, man, like that was the world when they were children. It's just crazy to me.
Insane. In
the membrane. Insane in the brain.
Yeah. So we also see that Martin Luther King's house was, he's a little older now, and his house was bombed. Luckily, his family was okay, but because of hatred for his cause, people had bombed his house. No one was hurt, fortunately, but still, that's just like it's something where someone easily could have in Dr. King's place could have been like, you know what, forget this. Like I obviously can't win. This is pointless. I'm going to turn this nonviolent protest into a violent protest, or I'm going to, take a different route. But no, he stuck to his guns even after something like that, which is nuts to me. Like that's almost the worst thing you can do aside from hurting your family or something, is destroying your place of living. And there was even an angry mob of African Americans formed because of this. And that's where Samuel L. Jackson's character comes in. He's trying to like drive them all to like, if they want violence, we can give them violence, but then Dr. King comes in with basically saying like, Gandhi drove the British out of India peacefully. We need to meet hate with love, and Christ taught love, not hate. So he's bringing religion into it as well. But whatever way you look at it, like the idea is the same. Like we're not going to fight. Essentially, don't fight fire with fire.
Which makes sense because, I mean, adding fire to fire just makes more fire.
Exactly.
Doesn't make sense, right?
Just keeps it burning. Doesn't make sense. You got to fight it with water. Water's peaceful.
Or sometimes dirt. Dirt can
too.
work.
Yeah.
Sometimes. You get dirty.
So after this, the kids are teleported back to the museum, and it's basically, I don't know how much time has passed, maybe a few minutes in their time, because Maria comes, who is their Latino friend at school, and she's saying the bus is leaving. The boys, Miles and Randy, they decide after school they're going to go back to the museum because, how cool is it to travel through time and see the rest of this story? And that's what was really cool, was they were excited about, seeing this history unfold. I'll tell you what, though, like even watching this as an adult, there were still some things where I know I had learned about this in school, but it's not something that my memory retained all of it. I just knew the generalities of it, I guess.
Yeah.
And so seeing some of these things played out in a very kid-like fashion, I'm like, okay, I get it now. And like, this is very straightforward and easy for me to digest, easy for me to understand. So it's like, wow, that was really interesting. That the part specifically I'm talking about is coming up where it's, so Bull Connor was this guy who hated everything Martin stood for, and he had Martin thrown in jail for the, nonviolent protest. Mm-hmm. So Martin's wife, Claretta, she called the White House and got to speak with, I don't know if she spoke directly with him, but it got to the president, who at the time was JFK, John F. Kennedy. He was saying basically that Martin deserves his rights and his freedoms. So this is something that their teacher is teaching them in school, by the way. So we're seeing kind of videos / animation of it. JFK frees him from prison and then kind of teams up with him to form some semblance of, or it was Equality for All Americans. And I think that was the name of the program at the time. And what's interesting is while we're watching these videos on the screen, we're seeing Miles and Randy in there as well. And his classmates are like, hey, like, I'm pretty sure that's you guys.
Yeah.
Like, you don't just have one of those faces. It's like, that's totally you. Like, you're wearing the same clothes and everything.
Right, because none of these characters changed their clothes. Seriously.
No, not really. No.
The only one that does is Kyle because his shirt keeps getting ripped. But
it keeps coming off.
But I did want to tack onto that real quick before we keep moving on, is that, like, I learned more about Martin Luther King Jr. from this than I did in all my years of school, which is sad. It's sad that it took, like, you know, in a 1 hour cartoon, I learned more than, like, taking a history class for 12 years taught me.
Right. No, I think it was the same for me. That's why I was saying, like, I feel like this was really educational. I mean, say what you will about it being a kids program, but still the core ideas are still there. And you get, even if it's only a small portion of some of these events that happen, like, you still get them. And sometimes in a very raw way where it's like, oh, wow, like especially seeing the videos of the stuff happening, like that was really kind of like, oh gosh, like it's hard to watch, but it's reality. Kind of,
I had like a vague idea that he was in jail at some point. Didn't know the circumstances, didn't know how he got out, didn't know that JFK intervened on behalf of his wife. Like, that's super cool to me. Like, to me, that's really cool history, and I can't believe that no one ever taught me that. You know, that's weird.
Yeah, it seems like civil rights movement in general was just kind of like skimmed over in school, as I recall growing up. So yeah, this fills in a lot of those gaps that I had. Obviously, going out and researching it myself and actually reading up on it would be more educational, but this is a good kind of placeholder to get you a good roundup of what was happening.
Yeah, and it gets you interested. It gives you a base, you know.
Exactly.
To branch from. So at some point they so like you were saying, the boys then go back to the museum, but Maria is suspicious because she's adamant that she saw them in that video. She says something to Kyle, the bully, and the bully's like, well, yeah, I want to corner them and beat them up anyway, so I'll go with you. And she's just like, cool. And I'm like, wow, she sucks now too. So all four of them end up back at the museum. They, Maria and Kyle, kind of confront Miles and Randy, who then are just like, okay, you know, let me explain this. Something here causes us to go back in time. But Maria had run into Mrs. Peck on their way in, who just basically said, remind those boys to wind the watch for me. So as they're kind of talking things out and Maria doesn't really believe them, she's just like, oh, here's that watch that we're supposed to wind. So she wound it. And then again, this time sends all four of them back in time and to the rally in DC, in which they got to see, like, there's multiple cool things. Like, they got to see a younger version of their teacher who was there and obviously on drugs, but but it was cool, right?
Yeah. And she's like, Dr. King's the ultimate.
He's far out.
He's about what's right for everybody.
Yeah, man.
She's right, but the way that she delivered it was just kind of funny.
It does sound like she's baked out of her mind when she's talking to them. It's funny.
Definitely. But they get to attend the March on Washington, correct? Like, that's what this is.
Yeah, that's where they end up. And he's standing in front of Lincoln's statue giving the big speech.
Oh man, it was so crazy to see it with that giant audience and everything.
Yeah.
It's powerful just hearing that speech. Like, he's a very commanding speaker. He's a reverend also by trade. So he's got that speaking voice. It's just incredibly inspiring. And you just can't help but, even if you're not even like directly there, you can't help but tune in and listen. Like, when you start hearing him speaking. Yeah.
And I just like, I love the way he talks, you know, and it's everything about it. It's not just the words that he says. It's the way he says, the pauses he uses, the way he emphasizes specific words and his inflections. it sucks you in, man. You want them to keep going. It's like listening to Morgan Freeman. Like, Morgan Freeman could just be talking about how to make a sandwich step by step, and you're gonna be enthralled. You're like, I gotta know what's next. Like, keep talking. Like, even if he's eating the sandwich, I want him to keep talking as he's eating it, and hear him chewing. And I'm the same way with like Martin Luther King Jr. It's just like the way that he talks and give the speeches, it just fires you up.
I have a dream that one day this nation will rise up and live out the true meaning of its creed. We hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal.
It's like a with great power comes great responsibility type thing. It's like he had the crowd with him, and he has that kind of commanding voice and the speech inflection that kind of makes you listen or makes people follow him with the leadership ability that it has. So it's like, thank goodness he was on the side of good here. You know, he could have easily driven people to do like terrible things,
right,
if he was so inclined. So this was like, it's great that he was the hero of this and not a villain of sorts.
Exactly. So after that, the students end up back in the museum again, and they end up seeing a headline on a newspaper in the museum that they hadn't seen before, and it's about the assassination of Martin Luther King Jr. And then they're kind of freaking out a little bit, and because at this point they look at him like a friend, at least. Especially Miles and Randy, who have talked with him so many times now. So they go back again to when Martin's super young. I don't know. They're trying to dissuade things from happening. I don't know. Like their plan, I don't think made a whole lot of sense to me. But they decided let's bring him back to our present so he can see what things are like. You know, I guess maybe giving him that gift of seeing his legacy. You know, before they know the inevitable.
Yeah, but they're warned by Miss Peck ahead of time that they shouldn't mess with.
You can't mess with time, man.
Yeah, you can't mess with time. And their idea, it makes sense to me in the way that, like, if they had just gone and stopped him from being assassinated by saying, like, no, you don't go in here right at this time, like, it wouldn't have drastically changed the timeline the way that it did without him being in that time period at all. And so they take him out at a young age to show him the future that he made, but by doing so they disrupt the timeline, and him being taken out of it alters everything because he's not there to change it in a positive way. And I thought that was a really interesting idea, even though like it was a half-baked idea. It's like, I also understand that they're kids, they're sixth graders, so they're not going to have all this thought through, nor are they going to understand the repercussions of altering a timeline. I've seen plenty of things that know, like, you shouldn't do that, but they're pretty fresh to this. So
yeah, exactly.
They had no idea that just taking one person out of the equation could disrupt it in such a way.
And especially, you know, we get to see when they come back to the present, they've created this other timeline now, basically, of where Martin Luther King Jr. didn't exist. Because they pulled him out. So nothing is the same. Like, that museum doesn't stand there. It's been like, you know, destroyed. It's like burned down or whatever. And, there's segregation. They don't even see Maria for a while. Kyle and Randy are best friends, and
they're racist
and super racist against Miles. And, the school is split. The principal is very racist. Their teacher isn't racist, but she's
complacent.
She's complacent because like the women aren't empowered at this point very much either. It's kind of like because Martin Luther King Jr. didn't lead the charge for equality, and that's the thing that was never really hammered home for me as a kid either, is that he didn't stand for black equality. He stood for equality, you know, for everyone. So without him leading that charge of equality, the women didn't get their fair share either. Right. So it's kind of like everybody's.
Yeah, and that this small, like, almost dystopian future alteration shows that really well in the condensed time that they put it in. Obviously in extremes, like I said, they need to go to just to drive the point home. So Mr. Harris, the principal, is super not just racist, he's everything. He's sexist, he's racist, he's just a bad guy.
Yeah.
But he's a product, almost like an encapsulation of everything that was a product of that period of time, had it never changed. Like if it had come to the present because the past wasn't mended by Martin Luther King Jr. since he was taken out of it. So he's saying like to the teacher, you know, the kid, well, Martin Luther King as a 15-year-old and Miles are both in the school. They shouldn't be in the school at all in the first place. Like that's strike one. So that's when Kyle and Randy are telling him to get out. Okay, so also something we didn't mention is the school, their middle school is called Martin Luther King Middle School. But in this timeline, it's altered to Robert E. Lee Middle School.
Yeah, I was just like, oh, dang.
Yeah, exactly. So you know from the start, like things are off on the wrong track.
That's a punch to the junk right there.
Yeah, it's a whites only water fountain, all white class.
And, you know, with all that said, like it's blatantly obvious within seconds what's happened to the timeline. You know, Miles keeps pointing out, this isn't right. This isn't where I'm from. But he still doesn't quite figure it out until like the last minute, you know?
Yeah, well, because Mr. Harris is saying, like, asking the teacher, like, why didn't you kick them out? Like, you're a stupid woman and never send a woman to do a man's job. Like, that's that inequality. Then we see Maria and this other Hispanic lady, like cleaning up the floors, like they're the janitors. Maria can't even speak English. Mr. Harris like comments like on them talking to the help, on Martin and Miles talking to the help, where he's like, they're lazy enough without your help. And it's like, oh my gosh, like everything, all the racial stereotypes this guy is just like bringing up, pointing out, and it's, man, he is really driving that home hard.
That would have been you, Joseph. You would have been cleaning the floor without Dr. Martin Luther King Jr.
I feel like since I'm half white, I would have been like part-time school, part-time floor cleaning. So I would have had kind of a mixed job there.
I don't know if they would have accepted that. I think they would have gone all floor.
Maybe not.
You know,
hopefully I would have at least known English.
You know, and I think that's a weird thing too. It's kind of like if you are, and I can't speak for the experience that you've had, but I feel like if you are half white and half another race, like my girlfriend has this too, it doesn't really matter because they view you as the non-white half, you know? Like it's weird.
I get that. I get that sometimes. And I think by the books, you're supposed to go by your father's like race, which in my case is Mexican. So on transcripts and stuff, I put that I'm Hispanic. Like that's what I have been putting since I was, you know, in first grade, kindergarten, whatever. So I think that's what drives it. But yeah, if you're not white, if you're not full white, you're not always seen as white. Like people always will point out the other side of you, not necessarily in a bad way. It's just like that's the side that I don't know, it just comes out more for whatever reason.
Yeah, and I mean my girlfriend goes through that too because she's half white and half Asian. So it's just, but like nobody, you know, no one ever like refers to her as something like, you know, they just say, oh yeah, the Asian girl or something, you know? And I'm just like, oh, and her dad's the white one too, which is interesting too.
Interesting.
So
yeah, so
it's just strange.
Usually though, at this point you put like mixed or something, and then it'll have a little like a line to put what you're mixed with. Yeah. I haven't filled anything like that in a long time, but I know when I did, like I think even on like applications you do it too. I've been working where I work for so long now, I don't even remember.
It cracks me up too, and this is like sort of a stereotype for white people, but I think it's funny. And I can say it because I'm white and I have white friends. So
okay.
No, it's just like you run into like a white person. If you start talking about ancestry, they will name every country that their family is freaking from, but then they'll be like, you know, well, he's Asian, he's black, you know, and like they won't get into countries when it comes to like other people. But
well, I think the most ignorant thing you hear people do is white people do in a lot of cases is like they'll ask somebody, like let's say it's a person who's obviously either Asian or European, anything, it doesn't matter, like anyone who's not like white, they'll be like, where are you from? And even if they're born in America, they'll just be like, I'm from here. And it's like, no, like, where are you actually from? And then it's like, oh my gosh, like that is just so ignorant to say something like that. And even if you don't mean anything negative by it, like it comes off like really terrible. So if you're a person who does that, don't do that.
And, you know, I read something today, and like I'm trying not to go too off topic from this, but it all kind of ties in. It's just like, so the idea of Black History Month, and I remember being a kid, like, you know, all the stupid white kids, those whiteys, including myself, you know, would make those jokes like, oh, when's White History Month? It's just, you know, that's every day, you know. But what makes Black History Month and stuff like that so significant isn't that we are taking a month to just to draw attention to it and stuff like that because it's so repressed. It's like the white culture kind of ruined Black history because, you know, when any Black person that was taken as a slave, that means there's no record really of their ancestry anymore. You know, like some might have it, but for a lot of them, like that was wiped. Like a lot of people, you know, can't trace back to what, you know, country they originated from. You know, obviously they could be like, oh, Africa, but Africa is a big place, you know? So it sucks that they can't drill down without doing DNA testing or something like that and say, hey, I'm from this place, or, you know, whereas, you know, someone like myself could name each country my ancestors are from. And so that's like part of the significance of this month and just, you know, giving time to it in general.
Thanks, white people.
Thanks.
I feel like we should get back to the movie though. And we're wrapping it up here because this is basically, that was the climax of it. And then it wraps up by on a sad note, of course, because the assassination of Martin Luther King does go through, and we obviously don't see it happen, but we see him walking into this place, and then we hear a gunshot. And so it's enough to infer what just happened. And then it jumps to the funeral, and that's such a sad scene, like seeing that, because that's actual video of this funeral session going on. And
you see like Jesse Jackson as one of the pallbearers, and
we see all the cars driving through. We see his wife crying.
Coretta.
So
that made me sick to my stomach, honestly.
It's heart-wrenching. Even knowing that it happened already, it's seeing it happen again. That's like, oh my gosh.
Oh, I can make it even worse. So like, unfortunately, I am from the same hometown as the guy that killed Martin Luther King Jr.
Oh, wow.
And it sucks growing up to know that I knew who this guy was and everything. Like, I just kind of wish that like information about the killer wasn't really taught, because it's just like, just forget who that piece of crap was, you know? Like, because by teaching about who the killer is kind of giving them some sort of reverence in a way, you know, because you're not forgetting him. You're keeping his memory alive as well. And I'm like, no, we need to forget about that guy and remember the guy he killed. So
yeah, don't remember who he was. Just remember what he stood for or didn't stand for.
Right.
And what he embodied was hate. And that's all you need to remember about that.
Yeah, exactly. And that's why I'm not going to mention the guy's name, because like it's like people like that, their names deserve to be lost to history.
Oh, sure. Like that's what should be washed out, not people's, people's heritage. So yeah, we see the funeral go through. We also see Miles go back and talk to Mrs. Peck, and she's like, or he told her, you'll never believe what happened. And she's like, no, I would, because I told you, like, fooling around with the past is a dangerous thing. And
this is after things got set back too.
Yeah, this is after things get set back, and we see the funeral service and everything.
Like Martin went back to his own time, and then everything happened as it would.
Exactly. Time righted itself after that. We see without Martin and the civil rights movement, like who knows what would have happened. And we kind of see a semblance of what could have happened from that. And that was just a really good point to drive home. And it's an interesting way that they showed it with the whole time travel thing and all that. But I think it was still, like I said, it was a great vessel for kids to drive this information into kids' minds and into their hearts, because it's got that level of entertainment to it, even though it's a very serious topic that they're covering. It's almost like a slightly more grown up Magic School Bus.
And the added, like, education inspired hip hop soundtrack.
Oh yeah. There's a lot of R&B and soul to it.
So cheesy.
It was also a product of its time too in the 90s. So those were really popular songs then. Well, maybe not all of them from that period, but they were songs that were very representational of what was being shown.
So now, like, the bully Kyle is buddies with everybody, and they go help rebuild, like, some communities in what looks like New York and stuff. Then we get a montage of the American flag with lots of stock photos of people of various races doing things together and being cool because, of course...
Kind of a closing quote. I think it was from Miles. I can't recall exactly, but a closing quote that I liked was that every one of us has the power to make the world a better place. All we need is a dream and the courage to make it happen. And I thought that was really beautiful and a good kind of send off to the movie.
Yeah, that is.
He learned his lesson and we learned along with him. And I thought that was a really interesting way to do it.
Yeah.
Well, Chris, looks like it's about time for us to send our inner kids back to the past to visit Dr. King so that they can learn from the mistakes of their idiotic white ancestors and tell us what they thought of the movie Our Friend Martin.
This cartoon was a little bit cheesy, but Martin seems like a cool guy, and I want to be friends with him, as long as he doesn't make me play baseball. I learned more about him watching this cartoon than I ever did in school. So even though I don't like learning, I'm glad I did. And I gave this cartoon 5 bowls of multicolored and equally delicious cereal out of 5.
Racism is an unfortunate part of our culture that may never be fully extinguished so long as people hold on to the misguided, segregated views of the past. However, Dr. Martin Luther King truly was one of the primary figures that helped us to usher in new levels of tolerance and equality to the public. I think the film, while not without its flaws, represents this very well, especially for its short runtime. It was easily digestible, with likable characters and enough entertainment to keep kids engaged, all while teaching them a valuable lesson. Overall, I give Our Friend Martin 5 big bowls of Kyle, please put on his shirt cereal out of 5, and I highly recommend this, especially when teaching the civil rights movement at school. In closing, I think the unsung hero of this movie is Mrs. Peck. She's obviously a Time Lord of some sort, and alongside the lesson of racial equality, teaches us an almost equally important one of not altering the time stream. You go back in time, you step on a bug, we never get Cinnamon Toast Crunch. Please, consider the consequences.
That's true. Cinnamon Toast Crunch is my favorite breakfast cereal. So just a word of warning, if any of you go back in time and ruin that for me,
we will hunt you down.
Yeah.
We will hunt you down.
We will
listen to
hunt
Mrs.
you
Peck.
down so
Do
hard.
not alter the timeline.
Yes. Oh, I need Cinnamon Toast Crunch.
Yeah.
I like the idea of her being a Time Lord. That's, way to nerd that up even more.
I just thought,
Good job.
like, it's never really expanded upon or anything, like how she has these powers or abilities.
It's true.
It doesn't need that necessarily, but it's like, that's kind of a interesting aspect that they don't really cover or talk much about.
All right, so let's see those Mrs. Peck Time Lord theories and get back to us with what you think's going on there. Is she the Doctor or is she another Time Lord? That's what I want to know.
Yeah, exactly. Next Doctor needs to be Whoopi Goldberg.
That's
all
true.
I'm saying.
They'll never go American though.
No, that's true.
Which is probably for the best because we ruin everything.
Yeah, well, also equally true.
So do you have any final thoughts on Our Friend Martin?
As strange as it is to say, and I almost feel a little stupid or a little like I just got a bad education for saying it, but I really feel like I did learn a lot from this movie that I should have learned a long time ago. And so it's like, it's embarrassing in a way, but it's like, it's more at the fault of the education system than it is anything I did or didn't do.
Yeah.
That said, I think this was a great movie for delivering this information in a way that was not just straight fact, not like History Channel stuff, nothing just completely dry. It had its moments. I mean, it was very 90s cheesy, but it worked for what it was trying to drive home. And it definitely did drill that point in well, even with especially with the very uncomfortable parts. So I would say, keep that as a caveat to it, in that there are times where you might get a little uncomfortable, but at the same time, maybe that's necessary to truly drive these points home. So I would say show this, watch this, show it to kids, especially when they're learning about this in school. And I think that it'll fit well. It's kind of timeless in that way. Even though it's a product of the 90s, it still has a very timeless message.
Yeah, I really enjoyed it. And I mean, don't feel embarrassed about the amount that you learned from this, because I mean, it's the same here. And I think it is a problem with the education system, at least when we were going through, because I'm sure there is still some bias there as far as what gets taught and what gets skimmed over and things like that. But as far as the movie goes, like I said, I really liked it. I mean, anything like this is going to have some amount of cheese to it. But the thing that stood out to me the most was how hopeful it was. I look at like the climate of today, especially when we've got someone in power that's, on the divisive side and very hateful, which in the last year or so has kind of brought out a little of the worst in our country that we've seen in the last couple of decades. This cartoon was a great reminder that, it doesn't take another political leader to fight back against that. Martin Luther King Jr. was just a good, honest man who stuck to his values. He genuinely believed in the good of all people and spoke out not against people in a way, like other people, but the lack of values and the lack of integrity that stood in the way of achieving something better. His doing that while not attacking other people specifically led to the biggest change we needed at the time. So I guess what I'm saying is, like, for those of you that feel beat down by your circumstances right now, for one, we've overcome much worse before, and two, it also means that any of us could lead the change for what we need. So take a play from MLK's book and then go out and just be a positive force. There's that old saying, be the change you want to see. It's just something that, it gets tossed around and stuff, but it's true, especially in this case with like Martin Luther King Jr. He didn't attack people. He wanted a positive change. So he was the positive change and people followed it and it worked and it changed us for the better.
Right. And that just kind of drives forward the point that his father had made. A man has no greater purpose in life than to serve his fellow man. And I think that just in general, that's just such a good point. And you really kind of said it very well in that it is a very hopeful idea. And even though it's back from the 90s, it still holds true today in certain ways. So there's still changes that need to be made, but that's also a good way of showing, even in worse situations, like change can be made by even just one person. So
and
take that away from it.
And it's kind of nice to think about, like, as much as we as people screw things up, we are just as good at fixing things as we are screwing them up, So
anyone's capable of doing that.
Yeah. So it was a really hopeful movie. And so thank you so much, Ira, for bringing this to us and letting us, allowing us the opportunity to delve more into Martin Luther King Jr. and his life and experiences and stuff. Because I mean, us not being, black men or women, it gives us a little bit more of a window so that we can be more empathetic and it challenged me to think about things and gave me ideas I hadn't had before. And I obviously learned quite a bit more about him in general. So it was this whole thing was just a great experience for me. And I love that we got to do this.
Yeah. Thank you, Ira. It's not often we learn something that we're going to carry with us the rest of our lives from one of these cartoons that we watch. But I think this one probably had that effect on us.
I think, this is definitely something I'm not going to forget. So Ira, I'm giving you an audio hug right now. That's me hugging you.
Chris does make those sounds when he hugs people.
That's the sound of my hug. So thanks, buddy. I appreciate it.
Yes, thank you, Ira. Well, listeners, looks like our milk supply is now run dry, so it's time for us to say goodbye. And next week, we'll be watching
Mighty Max, suggested via Instagram by NJ Horror. I'm excited, man. I'm excited.
This just goes to show you have the power.
You have some power, unless we veto it.
Yeah,
it's possible.
You have limited power based on our wants and needs.
Could you imagine if He-Man stuck his sword in the air and said things like that? I have the power unless somebody says otherwise.
Yeah. That was a longer version of it. They cut it down, and probably for the better.
Yeah, I'm gonna veto this one, He-Man.
We kind of sandwiched this very serious podcast. We started out with something ridiculous, and we ended on something ridiculous. But that's just kind of how our show works.
That's how we roll. That's how we roll, Joseph.
Yeah, true. Once again, I'm Joseph.
And I'm Chris.
We'll see you next Saturday.
Presented by Nerdsloth.
A place for lazy nerds.
If you like what you heard, consider donating at patreon.com/nerdsloth so we can continue bringing you quality shows. Be sure to also leave us a review and share your favorite episodes and clips on social media. If you're looking for more content, visit us at nerdsloth.com.